Some footage in this video is from Internet Archives. The links will be found down below.
You're being transported to another plane. Billions of blinks from Earth. This euphoric feeling, this place, this sensation, Evan explains. And this Evan will be your guide into the next door in your adventure. Open the door and hear the story of FromSoftware's worst mistake. A company that doesn't make a lot of those. But in this case, and with one game that released in 2015, they did. Was the mistake unforgettable? Was the mistake irredeemable? Or was the mistake so good that the rest of the game suffered as a result? Open the door and take your next steps.
There are no games quite like it. Released almost a decade ago, Bloodborne has been and will remain a gem to players worldwide. Every single bit of this game is fantastic, and every time I've ever logged in, I get giddy thinking about, well, just everything. After hyping up Bloodborne like that, and with this title, you might wonder what mistake FromSoft has made, and did you just get clickbaited into this topic? I did clickbait you, because there's two mistakes here, and they both land us in the haunting town of Yharnam. Can you imagine if I told you that Elden Ring has over 300 weapons? Now, what if I told you to knock that number down to just 26? You might think that's crazy, but this was all in the vision of Miyazaki's world. The mistake FromSoft would make is not realizing that the quality of these weapons trumped any quantity of other games. Bloodborne Did This Right is one of my highest viewed shorts of all time for a reason. The community desperately wants these weapons to return. So let's go through them to really boom hammer home what I mean.
Did somebody say boo?
The boom hammer is exactly the thematic feel you'd want to complement this Victorian steampunk atmosphere. This one was acquired by pretty easy yet memorable means. While the boom hammer is an amazing addition, the main functionality and the means to equip a small and a large version is exactly why saying that 15 main right-hand melee weapons is closer to 30. And if you want to get more particular, we'll include the DLC where the boom hammer was found, making the total go to 26, or 52 total weapons if we're counting the combinations as different ones. Okay, let's get even more specific and include that each of the weapons has 2 extra versions in the Chalice dungeons at some different custom seed. And with that, there is 156 total right-hand weapons in Bloodborne. Sometimes it's quality and quantity over just quantity. While the Chalice dungeons and seeding might be something Miyazaki was quoted saying he wanted to improve on, and would follow through with that in Elden Ring, Miyazaki has also called Bloodborne the game that had left the biggest mark on his heart. And you can feel that in the weapon design philosophy. Each weapon felt unique when you found them scattered throughout Yharnam, as you never really found them scattered, unlike the disposable heals and silver bullets. This game was all about the weapon technique and mastery. A prime example of this was the Blades of Mercy. See this large right-hand dagger? Well, you could parry by shooting a boss or an enemy mid-swing, then stab into them and ruin their lives. Or you could go full Eileen the Crow mode and break the blades into smaller daggers with a button press to quickly move for strikes. Bloodborne was all about rewarding the mastery of its combat, as striking with them then hitting the transform button would do a transformation attack. Bloodborne's DLC would expand upon this concept and push it to an unforgettable level in the Old Hunters DLC. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower uses her Rakuyo against you, but you can also gain them for yourself if you fight for your life in this well. Alright, fish boy. Yeah, he's stronger than any of the bosses in the game. Holy shit, they're fighting each other! Let's go! It's a Royal Rumble! I hit him with a Shaman Bone Blade. Elden Ring would only learn half of the lesson from Bloodborne. While I think Elden Ring understood that some weapons were worth a large journey to acquire, I don't think that Elden Ring's hundreds of weapons are as memorable as about 30 of them. While Bloodborne, I find myself remembering every single one and thinking about them whenever I play another Souls game. Clearly Miyazaki thought about them too, as weapons like the Shikage from Bloodborne appear in Elden Ring. Does this look familiar? A blood katana, Maybe even Rivers of Blood familiar. Miyazaki was very particular about both games' philosophy on weapon design. I believe Elden Ring was more focused on celebrating previous weapons in the series and combining them into a new giant world, while Bloodborne was one cohesive steampunk Victorian land. Sure, it is preference, and if quantity is really your thing, then fair enough. But I call it a mistake to abandon less is more, and the Shikage really represents this. Sure, the main transform animation is a pretty basic blood katana attack to Elden Ring standards, but they experimented with a whole stat that you could build into called Blood Tinge, which has a trade-off. You take damage over time the more you are in this transform state, but you also deal more damage and rally it back. Rallying damage was another system I feel is a mistake to abandon, and clearly Lords of the Fallen agreed, as they even have their own version of the rally system, taking damage, recovering that health back when dealing damage. I don't think future games need to abandon a shield the way Bloodborne did, but I think this game understood its goals exactly, and I think it is a mistake to not expand on a system that worked. Clearly FromSoft agreed in their DLC for Bloodborne, because the weapons kept getting crazier, and I have unfortunately got to say that Elden Ring did this next one dirty. The Whirligig Saw may look familiar to Elden Ring players, and I have even made a short on how Elden Ring missed a golden opportunity. The Saw in Bloodborne is pretty heavy on one transformation, but this is the best ease of use weapon the game has, simply because you can keep revving the blade into whatever target, and it has heavy stagger potential for easy crits. It's not the most exciting, but it is the most lethal. And in Elden Ring, the only thing I ever see people use this for is a glitch that is in a speedrun, so I guess it was done right. You definitely understand at this point, transformation weapons were a pretty sweet idea, but I think the lesser known portion was that each of them worked with a build, and some would scale more damage to different types of enemies and PvP. The Beast Claws, for example, were a build that I still haven't mastered. These werewolf claws scaled with the Beast Embrace rune, and with the rune it added new attacks to it. The beast meter would tick and tick up, and more kills were needed to keep it fed. While some weapon transformations would do a big burst of damage to you, like the Bloodletter. Okay, what do you think this weapon transforms into? Really quickly, if you don't know and you want to guess, pause the video, put it in the comments.
I am in a room full of these doors and no step borrowed to help me get out.
The Bloodletter would stack a debuff called Frenzy onto you, and Frenzy was Bloodborne's version of going more insane. Not too far from Frenzy in Elden Ring, but this was stacked with the other major mistake FromSoft would make, and that is abandoning Insight.
The next door you're about to open is into the Tale of Insight, a system that grants us eyes, and many, many more. Insight is a system that was founded in Bloodborne in 2015, and has never since returned to any FromSoftware game, making it yet another large mistake. Open the door and hear the tale of Insight.
Insight was this extra hidden element of the game that every Bloodborne fan loved, and for good reason. Insight was the knowledge of the Great Ones becoming more empowered on the player, via discovering new areas, defeating bosses, and just finding insight as a collectible to use. This stat was used to see the world for what it truly was, and it was horrifying. See this innocent church with nothing wrong at all? What if I gave everyone watching this video nightmares for the rest of your lives with this? This was there the whole time. Insight is more fitting of the Lovecraftian world, but I think incorporating a similar system to other From Software games would have been special, as Elden Ring even had frenzy and madness as an element. I mean, you even get an ending for the frenzied flame. Like, come on. Insight itself, I would argue, could have been expanded upon further. I'll go through some of my favorite interactions with it, but if this system doesn't get you a little excited for more, you might need a little hit of Madman's knowledge and get a whole lot more insane. For starters, these big guys with lamps now have eyeballs and new attacks from higher insight. You can't even talk to the doll in the Hunter's Dream without 1 insight. At 15 insight, you can find Gehrman talking in his sleep, and it's really sad.
Help me. Unshackle me, please. Anybody. I've had enough of this dream.
At 30 insight, the Winter Lanterns enemy can be heard singing an off-key tone at a further distance. 50 insight will make the Hunter's Dream theme change from this to this. "60 makes a baby's cry heard off in the distance. And my favorite of all, if you fight the Witches of Hemwick, they are useless to you if you have 0 insight, as there are no shadow monsters because you have not gone mad enough to see the shadow monsters. But this fight will become increasingly more difficult the more insight you have. This also applies to that frenzy stat. The more insight, the faster you accumulate frenzy, which can be a massive pain. Now, if you want to lose insight, you have to just get sucked by the grossest enemy in the game, the brain suckers. Or you can buy items with insight from these cute little bath goblins. This system could have been pushed much further in future entries, and it's a giant mistake to have abandoned this element altogether. Can you imagine new ways to fight some of the Elden Ring bosses if a similar stat was there? Maybe more insight adds new attacks to bosses, and you will get higher rewards for the more insight you have. Maybe in Elden Ring it could scale with frenzied flame attacks, to add risk reward much further the more you master Elden Ring. The only game that has an insight system is Lords of the Fallen, with its version coming from experience on weapons. You unlock more descriptions and build potential with them, but that's kind of lame. Lords of the Fallen definitely took a page from Bloodborne with the Land of the Dead, however, since it has one of the coolest mechanics with the lamp I have ever seen. And I would be shocked if the insight system wasn't one of the inspirations. It's time for FromSoft to make good on that and really bring insight back.
Insight and weapons. 2 combinations that can grow ever so large. What happens when the best of the best are showcased? And what happens when From Software abandons these ideologies completely? Open the door and take your first steps towards insight combined with From Software's best trick weapons out there.
Now, for how fantastic Bloodborne systems were, there were still bound to be some duds. Not to say they were bad, but they didn't offer the level of excitement others had. For starters, the threaded cane, which was one of 3 starter weapons in the game. It's at its best when you're constantly transforming this cane into a bladed whip, but it was really never that powerful or spectacular compared to others. This can be said for the rifle spear. You can imagine what that does. The other one would have been the Raider Palash, or Rider Palash, however you want to say it, tell me in the comments. And the church pick. But the pick is best used to slay enemies at Castle Canehurst, a secret snowy castle filled with the grossest spider ticks you will ever see. Get away from me. In this castle is where you will also discover the Palash, a rapier that transforms into a pistol rapier hybrid. Probably not one of the better transformations, but it looks amazing. However, it definitely wins for PvP, as melee and shooting at the same time while not showing your pistol has the benefit of class and disguise. Plus, you could have 2 pistols at the same time, and who doesn't want that? Other than that, we have the Saw Cleaver and the Hunter Axe. Both starter weapons, but I would argue the Hunter Axe is one of the best weapons in the game purely for the large range on the spin attack, even if it is a little basic and boring. Even though these aren't the best, they felt unique and far better than many standard weapons we've gotten since. See, those are really just the ones you could argue are kind of boring, or even ready to be upgraded, like the Saw Spear is just a better Saw Cleaver. And while I love the Boom Hammer, there's no arguing that the Stake Driver is way more fun. Then we get into the weirder and more ambitious category. These weapons are so freaking cool, but they either offer a spectacle or a gimmick rather than pure dominant gameplay. You can already see how not including trick weapons in future entries has been a massive mistake, and you're also realizing that this was my trap card to get you to watch a video about trick weapons for this long. Since you've spent so much time here, why don't you subscribe, or I'll hit you with a Tonitrus. That's right, this is a simple yet gimmicky weapon. The Tonitrus saved me in the ROM fight. This is a Tesla coil on a mace, and it's very proud of being that. Want weirder and perhaps more gimmicky? How about I give you a hand? The amygdala arm was a funny way to upgrade the threaded cane. While the cane turned into a whip, so too did the arm, with its gross sounding fleshy smacks. I always loved the detail that it moves so disconnected, and apparently, according to the lore of it, it is alive. Really just amazing stuff. The old hunters would even go on to take ideas that Bloodborne's base game of weapons offered and crank the dial to the point of pure frenzy. Like Simon's Bowblade. Easily one of the most creative transformations, Simon's Bowblade had a heavy emphasis on transformation. The normal blade looks like a curved sword, but the Bowblade uses your ammo to deliver fast and striking blows. Funny enough, if you wanted more ammo but were out of silver bullets, you could blood tinge yourself for 5 extra shots at the cost of your health. If you scaled Simon's with blood tinge for bloody arrows, it was even more powerful. This is the weapon to show your friends who never played Bloodborne. We are now entering the best of the best territory for both DLC and non-DLC, which I will lead off with the granddaddy of them all, Ludwig's Holy Blade. This might be the best weapon in the game pre-DLC, just for the pure versatility. This is a long, heavy sword that transforms into a straight sword with some of the most fluid moves you will ever see. If I haven't hammered in the point that FromSoft made a big mistake not bringing weapon transformations back, then it's best I Kirkhammer that point in. The Kirkhammer is this big block that also transforms into a straight sword. And if you use bolt paper on this hammer, it makes it look like Mjolnir. This is just as good as the Holy Blade, but it's missing the same lore impact of the name Ludwig. As when we finally meet the leader of the White Church Hunters, known for killing thousands of beasts, trapped in the old Hunter's nightmare realm, we find Ludwig, but he's not the same. Eventually, we deal enough damage that he reveals the longest running weapon in FromSoftware's history. The Moonlight Greatsword is without a doubt at its best in this game. The main reason, other than fighting Ludwig for it, is the transformation between its Moonlight state and its normal state, and the heavy attacks consuming ammo instead of mana from other entries. Something about the color, the presentation, and the raw power this greatsword has makes it stand out. It is beloved for a reason, and it's kind of broken in this game, since you can add more range to a game that's all about close combat. So, that unfortunately brings me to this haunting conclusion. Fans have tried to emulate transformation weapons. Most recently, the Cinders mod on Dark Souls 3 tried this, and it's just not the same. From needs to bring the game to PC with a proper remaster, because we may never see combat like this game again. Everyone praises the fantastic combat in these games, especially Sekiro. but I have seen almost nobody talk about how Bloodborne did the system right. I think that Miyazaki and FromSoft are very particular on what they want to provide to the experience, and it doesn't always make a ton of sense for the games to share the weapon ideology of trick weapons, especially when you're talking about a fantasy land that doesn't really fit the theme. But some combination system would be greatly appreciated. I love every game in the Souls series, but in this video, we really talked about two of the larger reasons I keep coming back to Bloodborne. And most of all, these systems were so good that to me, it will always be seen as a major mistake that they were abandoned. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Sometimes mistakes aren't traditional. Sometimes mistakes find themselves in the way of something good. FromSoftware may have made a mistake by abandoning the weapon system and the insight system, but it doesn't mean it's too late. Bloodborne on PC may be in another universe, but Bloodborne will be forever. I hope you're ready to open up the next door into the next episode of EvanExplains.